Hey there, future subscribers. Before we dive into this incredible tale of corporate betrayal and a second chance at love, please drop a comment telling us what city you're tuning in from. And at the end, don't forget to rate the story from 0 to 10. Also, make sure you hit that follow button and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on more stories like this one. Now, sit back, relax, and immerse yourself in every detail. The billionaire's cowardice. The air was sharp and unforgiving, a classic Seattle October evening, carrying the scent of damp earth and evergreen. Ethan Ellis, a magnate with a net worth that eclipsed small countries, was adjusting his platinum cufflinks as he stepped out of his midnight blue Aston Martin DBS. 34 years old, he possessed an imposing presence that commanded attention in boardrooms across 3 continents. At 6'2", impeccably tailored in a charcoal gray suit, his steel gray eyes could dissect a business proposal in seconds, and his dark hair was styled with military precision. His jawline was so sharp it could cut glass. His hands, now gripping the door handle, bore no wedding band, but carried the weight of multi-billion-dollar decisions. This was not his world. The modest 2-story homes in Maplewood Estates, with their white picket fences and children's bikes scattered across the driveways, were utterly foreign to a man who resided in a penthouse overlooking the city's glittering skyline. Yet here he was, standing before 12447 Sycamore Lane, rehearsing the lines he'd been practicing for the entire 20-minute drive from his office. "I'll pay for everything the baby needs, but please stop messaging me." Simple, clean, final. The last 11 months had been a carefully orchestrated dance of avoidance. Every phone notification brought another photo, another video, another gentle attempt by Clara to keep him connected to a life he'd chosen to abandon. A tiny hand squeezing a toy, first gummy smiles, clumsy attempts to crawl. Each message felt like a dull ache in his chest, a reminder of the cowardly decision he'd made when married life felt suffocating. Ethan had built an empire on making ruthless choices. He'd fired hundreds of employees to save companies, walked away from multi-million-dollar deals that didn't align with his vision, and restructured entire corporations without losing a wink of sleep. But demanding a divorce over a phone call when Clara was 7 months pregnant had been the single most despicable thing he had ever done, and the only decision that had tormented him every day since. He'd met her at a tech conference in San Francisco, where she'd been hired to photograph the event. While other attendees aggressively networked, Ethan found himself captivated by the woman with warm, honey-colored hair who moved through the crowd like a whisper, capturing candid moments with a vintage camera. Clara had an ethereal quality, 27, yet with eyes that held a wisdom beyond her age. Her skin was soft as porcelain, dusted with a constellation of freckles across her nose, and when she smiled, it was like watching the sunrise after the longest night. Where Ethan was all sharp edges and calculated moves, Clara was soft curves and spontaneous laughter. They were magnetic opposites, who somehow created a perfect equilibrium until marriage started feeling like a cage, and the pregnancy intensified everything. The brutal truth was that Ethan loved Clara more than anyone, but he wasn't built for the daily compromises marriage demanded. The shared meals when he wanted to work late, the weekend plans that interrupted his momentum, the constant need to consider another person's feelings before making decisions. When Clara got pregnant, all those tiny suffocations multiplied. He began to feel trapped by the very love that had once liberated him. So he took the coward's way out. A phone call on a Tuesday night when she was 7 months along, her belly round with his son, while he sat in his car outside their loft, unable to find the courage to walk inside and say the words to her face. I want a divorce, Clara. I can't do this anymore. Now, standing on his ex-wife's doorstep, his heart hammering against his ribs, Ethan wondered if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. The neighborhood was eerily silent, save for the distant sound of children playing and a dog barking somewhere down the street. He could see the warm light spilling from the living room curtains of the home where Clara now lived alone with his son, a sharp contrast to the sleek downtown loft they had shared. His phone buzzed. Another message. This time, not from Clara. Board meeting moved to 6:00 p.m. Tokyo investors are impatient. Need your signature on merger docs tonight. Vanessa. Vanessa Chin, his chief of staff, had managed his schedule with military efficiency for the past 3 years. She knew about Clara and the baby, though she never commented on his decision to maintain distance. But Ethan saw the judgment in her eyes every time he deflected questions about his personal life or worked through another holiday. He fired off a quick reply, "Handle it. I'll be unreachable for the next hour." Taking a deep breath, Ethan raised his fist and knocked. 3 sharp raps that sounded louder than he'd intended in the quiet evening air. His stomach churned with a mixture of anxiety and something else he couldn't name. Fear, regret, hope. Footsteps approached from the other side, and he heard the soft click of a deadbolt turning. The door opened, and there she was. Clara looked utterly exhausted. Her honey hair, usually vibrant, was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore an oversized cream cardigan that had clearly seen better days. Dark circles shadowed her green eyes, and her face showed the particular kind of fatigue that came from months of sleepless nights and solo parenting. But even so, even worn down by the weight of everything she'd been carrying alone, she was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. In her arms, she held a baby with Ethan's steel-gray eyes and Clara's delicate features. The child, his son, stared at him with curious intensity. His small fingers curled into the fabric of his mother's sweater. "Ethan." Clara's voice was carefully neutral, but he noticed the slight tremor beneath the surface. "I wasn't expecting you." He opened his mouth to recite his rehearsed speech, but the words died in his throat. Because in that moment, standing face to face with the woman who had been his wife, who had trusted him with her heart only to have it shattered by a cowardly phone call, and their son, who had never truly known his father, something shifted inside him. The baby tilted his head, studying this tall stranger with serious concentration, and then, clear as a bell, he pointed a chubby finger directly at Ethan and spoke his very first word. "Dada." Time stopped. The world narrowed to that single moment, to that perfect syllable that changed everything. Ethan felt his knees buckle as 11 months of carefully constructed walls crumbled around him. The baby, his son, had called him Dada. Not in recognition, perhaps, but in an instinctive understanding that this man standing in the doorway was someone important, someone who belonged in his small universe, even if his father had been too afraid to stay. Clara's eyes filled with tears as she looked from her son to the man who had once been her husband. Her lips parted in surprise. "He's never," she whispered. "That's his first word." What do you think about this story so far? Would you have turned back like Ethan? Share your thoughts in the comments. 2. An unexpected invitation. The single word hung in the air between them, like a bridge neither knew how to cross. Ethan stood motionless on the threshold, his carefully rehearsed speech dissolving into nothing as he stared at his son, a child who somehow knew exactly who he was, despite only seeing him once, in a sterile hospital room 11 months ago. Clara hiked the baby higher on her hip, her green eyes searching Ethan's face for any hint of what came next. The evening air carried the smell of someone's barbecue and the distant laughter of children being called in for dinner. but their small corner of the world seemed suspended in time. "Can I?" Ethan's voice cracked, and he cleared his throat. "Can I come in?" It wasn't what he'd planned to say. He had driven here to deliver an ultimatum, to set clear boundaries, to finally cut the invisible threads that kept pulling him back to this life he'd convinced himself he didn't want. Instead, he found himself asking permission to enter a space that had once been as much his as hers. Clara hesitated, her fingers automatically smoothing her son's fine, dark hair, a nervous habit he remembered from their marriage. She had done the same to her own hair whenever she was uncertain, whenever she needed a moment to think. "Leo is about to eat," she said softly, naming their son in his presence for the first time. Leo. She had texted him the name when the baby was born, along with a picture of a wrinkled little face and the message, "Leo James Ellis, 7 Hal, 1 Oz. He's perfect." Ethan had stared at that text for hours, memorizing every detail of the baby's face, before finally replying, "Beautiful. Thank you for letting me know." Now, hearing the name out loud, seeing Leo in person, it all felt overwhelmingly real. "I won't stay long," Ethan said, though he wasn't sure he believed his own words. After another moment of hesitation, Clara stepped aside. "Fine, but he gets grumpy when he's hungry." The house was smaller than their old loft, but warmed by Clara's touch. Her photographs covered the walls, not the commissioned work that paid the bills, but the personal projects that fueled her soul. Black and white portraits of elderly couples holding hands, children playing in rain puddles, moments of pure human connection captured with her characteristic intimacy. But it was the baby gear scattered throughout the living room that hit him the hardest. A vibrating chair by the window, colorful toys spread over a playmat, tiny socks kicked off and abandoned on the coffee table. Evidence of a life being lived, a child being raised, a routine he knew nothing about. Leo had been watching him with serious eyes, but now he started wriggling in his mother's arms, reaching toward a basket of toys near the couch. "He wants down," Clara said, sitting on the floor and placing Leo onto a soft blanket. The baby immediately crawled toward a set of stacking rings, babbling happily to himself. Ethan remained standing, feeling like an intruder in this intimate domestic scene. His expensive suit felt ridiculous here, among the plastic cups and storybooks. He watched as Leo grabbed a bright red ring, examined it with the intense concentration only babies possess, and then attempted to eat it. "Everything goes in his mouth," Clara explained quietly, gently redirecting Leo's attention to a safer toy. "The pediatrician says it's normal. He's exploring his world." The casual mention of doctor visits, appointments Ethan had never attended, milestones he had missed, brought a fresh wave of guilt. How many times had Clara taken Leo to the doctor alone? How many nights had she paced the floor with a teething baby, while Ethan slept peacefully in his king-sized bed, 30 miles away? "How do you?" he started, then stopped, unsure how to voice the question burning in his chest. Clara looked at him, her expression cautious but not unkind. "How do I what? How do you do it? All this by yourself?" She was silent for so long he wondered if she would answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was factual, as if she were talking about the weather. "You learn. You adapt. You don't really have a choice." She paused, watching Leo successfully stack one ring on top of another, before clapping his hands with delight. "Mrs. Rodriguez next door sometimes helps. She watches him when I have wedding shoots, and there's a playgroup at the community center on Thursdays. Mrs. Rodriguez, the kind, older neighbor who used to bring them homemade Spanish tortilla." Ethan felt a pang of loss, realizing Clara had maintained connections he'd forgotten existed. "I didn't know you moved here," he said, though the statement felt inadequate. There was so much he didn't know. "Rent is cheaper," Clara responded simply, "and it's good for Leo to have a yard." Through the window, Ethan could see a small garden with a swing set that looked newly assembled. Had she put that together alone? The image of Clara wrestling with instruction manuals and power tools while single-handedly managing a baby tightened his chest. Leo had tired of the rings and was now crawling toward Ethan's feet, drawn by the shine of his Italian leather shoes. Without thinking, Ethan crouched down, bringing himself to the baby's eye level. Leo paused, cocking his head with that same serious look, and reached out to touch Ethan's face with a small, sticky hand. "Dada," he said again, softer this time, as if testing the word. Ethan's breath hitched. Up close, he could clearly see himself in Leo's features, the shape of his eyes, the stubbornness of his jawline, even the way one eyebrow lifted slightly higher than the other when he was curious. But he could also see Clara, in the soft curve of Leo's cheeks and the way his hair curled at the nape of his neck. "He looks like you," Clara said quietly, as if reading his thoughts. "He has your smile," Ethan countered, remembering the photos she'd sent of Leo's first irreal grin. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Leo explore this fascinating new person who had appeared in his world. The baby had no concept of divorce papers or custody arrangements or the complex emotions that had driven his father away. He simply saw someone who belonged, someone who felt like home, in a way that defied logic. Ethan's phone vibrated insistently in his pocket, but for the first time in months, he completely ignored it. "Why did you come here tonight?" Clara asked suddenly. Her voice was carefully controlled, but he could hear the years of pain beneath the surface. Ethan looked up from Leo's face to meet her eyes, those same green eyes that had captivated him at a conference 2.5 years ago, that had looked at him with such love and trust on their wedding day, that had been filled with tears and disbelief during that awful phone call 15 months ago. "I came to tell you to stop sending me pictures," he admitted quietly, "to ask you to stop trying to keep me involved." Clara's face became very still. "And now?" Leo chose that moment to lose his balance and tumble onto his padded bottom. Instead of crying, he laughed, a bright, delighted sound that filled the room with pure joy. Ethan felt something give way in his chest, something he'd been carefully sealing off for months. "Now I don't know what I want," he said honestly. But even as he spoke the words, he knew they weren't entirely true. Because sitting on her living room floor, watching his son discover the world with fearless curiosity, while his ex-wife looked at him with a mix of hope and wariness, Ethan was beginning to suspect that he knew exactly what he wanted. He just wasn't sure he deserved it. 3. The bedtime ritual and a confession. Leo's bedtime routine was a carefully choreographed dance Clara had perfected over 11 months of trial and error. Ethan watched from the nursery doorway, feeling like an anthropologist observing an alien culture, one he should have belonged to, but had chosen to remain a stranger to. The room was painted a soft sage green, with white furniture that looked like it had been assembled from a box. Clara had hung her own photographs on the walls, close-ups of Leo's tiny fingers, his first smile, the way the sunlight fell across his face during an afternoon nap. Each picture told a story Ethan had missed, moments that existed only in these frames and in Clara's memory. "Bath first," Clara murmured to Leo, who was now rubbing his eyes and showing the first signs of evening grumpiness. "Then bottle, then bed." She looked at Ethan, uncertainty flickering in her features. You can stay if you want. Or leave. Whatever feels right." Nothing felt right. That was the problem. Ethan found himself following them into the small bathroom, where Clara had already filled a blue plastic tub with a few inches of warm water. Leo immediately brightened at the sight of his bath, clapping his hands and babbling excitedly. "He loves the water," Clara said, carefully lowering Leo into the tub. "Splashes everywhere, but he loves it." As if to prove her point, Leo immediately began drumming the surface of the water with both hands, sending droplets flying in every direction. His delighted giggles filled the small space, and despite everything, the guilt, the confusion, and the gaping hole where the last 11 months should have been, Ethan found himself smiling. "He's fearless," he observed. "Completely." Clara's voice held a tinge of pride mixed with exasperation. "He tried to climb the bookshelf yesterday. I turned my back for 2 seconds to answer the phone and found him 3 shelves up." The casual mention of daily disasters, of the constant vigilance required to keep a mobile infant safe, reminded Ethan again of everything he'd abdicated. While he had been closing deals and expanding markets, Clara had been learning how to child-proof electrical sockets and wondering if every fever meant a trip to the emergency room. "Were you scared?" he asked quietly. "When he was born, I mean. Doing it alone?" Clara's hands paused on the washcloth she'd been using to wipe Leo's face. For a moment, the only sound was the baby's contented splashing. "Terrified," she finally admitted. Not of the labor, though that was scary enough, but of everything that came after. Bringing him home to an empty house, not having anyone to ask if his breathing sounded right, if he was eating enough, if I was doing it right. She paused, watching Leo discover he could squeak the rubber ducky by squeezing it. "Mrs. Rodriguez came over that first night. She found me sitting on the floor by his crib at 3 in the morning, just watching him sleep, because I was too afraid something would happen if I closed my eyes." Clara's laugh was soft, but laced with old pain. "She made me tea and told me about raising her own kids, how every new parent feels like they're failing most of the time." Ethan's throat felt tight. He had been in a hotel room in Singapore that night, celebrating the successful launch of his Asian division, with champagne and congratulations from investors who didn't know, or didn't care, that his son had been born 9,000 miles away. "I should have been there," he said. "Yes," Clara replied simply. "You should have been." The bluntness hit him harder than anger. There was no malice in her voice, no attempt to make him feel worse than he already did. Just simple truth, delivered with the objective tone she would use to comment on the weather. Leo had grown tired of his toys, and was now studying Ethan with that serious expression he seemed to reserve for important observations. Without warning, he stretched both arms out toward his father, making the unmistakable grabbing motion that meant, "Pick me up." Clara looked surprised. "He doesn't usually do that." She broke off, shaking her head. "Do you want to lift him? He's ready to come out." Ethan's hands trembled slightly as he reached for Leo, the droplets of water clinging to the baby's skin, making him slick and precious, and somehow more real than anything Ethan had touched in months. Leo was heavier than he expected, solid and warm against his chest, and he smelled like baby soap and something indefinable that Ethan recognized as simply his son. "Watch your suit," Clara warned, reaching for a hooded towel. But Ethan didn't care about the Italian wool or the Egyptian cotton. He was too busy marveling at the way Leo's small body fit perfectly against him, how the baby's head found the exact spot on his shoulder, how those tiny fingers immediately tangled into his tie as if staking a claim. "Dada," Leo murmured sleepily against Ethan's neck, and the word reverberated in his chest like a tuning fork. Clara wrapped the towel around both of them, her hands brushing Ethan's as she bundled the soft terry cloth around Leo's shoulders. For a moment, they were a complete circle: father, mother, son, and the rightness of it was so powerful it made Ethan's knees weak. "He trusts you," Clara said softly, wonder in her voice. "I've never seen him go like that with anyone, not even Mrs. Rodriguez." They moved back into the nursery, where Clara had already laid out Leo's pajamas, a small blue cotton sleeper covered in sailboats. Ethan found himself reluctant to put the baby down, to break this connection that felt more real than any contract he'd ever signed. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted, as Clara gently took Leo to get him dressed. Do what? Any of this. Being a father, changing diapers, knowing when he's hungry or sleepy or sick. He gestured helplessly at the room around them. You've built this whole world for him, and I'm just now learning, Clara finished gently. That's all any parent does. Learn as you go and hope you don't mess up too badly. She sat in the rocking chair by the window, Leo now dressed and ready for his bottle. The baby's eyes were growing heavy, but he kept glancing toward Ethan, as if to make sure he was still there. The first time I gave him a bath, I cried the whole time, Clara continued. He was so small and slippery, and I was convinced I was going to drop him or hurt him somehow. Mrs. Rodriguez had to coach me through it step by step. The image of Clara, alone and overwhelmed, struggling with tasks that seemed so natural now, squeezed Ethan's chest. How many moments like that had there been? How many times had she needed help or reassurance or just another pair of hands, while he had been on the other side of the country pretending their life together had never existed? His phone buzzed again. Vanessa, no doubt, wondering why he'd completely missed the board meeting. For the first time in his professional life, Ethan powered it completely off. I keep thinking about that phone call, he said suddenly. What I said to you. Clara's hand paused on Leo's back, but she didn't look up. I rehearsed it, he continued, the words tumbling out. I sat in my car outside our house for an hour, rehearsing the exact phrase like it was a business presentation, and even then, I couldn't say it to your face. Why? The question was barely a whisper. Ethan closed his eyes, recalling that night with perfect, painful clarity. Clara had been folding baby clothes at the kitchen table, her movements slow and careful because her back ached. She had looked so beautiful and so tired, one hand unconsciously resting on her round belly where Leo was growing. And Ethan had known with absolute certainty that if he walked through that door, if he looked into her eyes and saw the love and trust that had always been there, he would never be able to leave. Because I knew you would fight for us, he said quietly. You would ask me to stay, to try harder, to remember why we fell in love in the first place, and I was afraid you would talk me into it. Clara finally looked up, tears silently tracing paths down her cheeks. Would that have been so terrible? I thought so. I thought I was suffocating, that marriage was just a trap, keeping me from being who I really was. He laughed bitterly. It turns out who I really am without you is just a man in expensive suits who works 18 hours a day and has everything he thought he wanted, and nothing that actually matters. Leo had fallen asleep against his mother's chest, his breathing deep and even, but instead of putting him in his crib, Clara kept rocking him, as if she needed the comfort of his warm weight as much as he did. What do you want now, Ethan? She asked. Truly? The question hung between them like a challenge. Outside, the suburban street settled into evening silence. Porch lights flickered on, families gathered for dinner. Children were tucked in by parents who hadn't missed a single night of the routine. Ethan looked at his sleeping son, at the woman who had once been his wife and was still the other half of his soul, at the life he had walked away from in a moment of panic and pride. I want to learn how to bathe him without getting both of us nervous, he said. I want to know his favorite toy, and if he's teething, and if he still wakes up at 3 in the morning, like he did when he was a newborn. He paused, bracing himself for the harder truth. I want to apologize to you every day for the rest of my life, and find some way to earn back what I threw away. I want to be the man you thought you married, the father Leo deserves. His voice broke. I want to come home. But even as he spoke the words, he could see the walls go up in Clara's eyes, the careful distance she had learned to keep for her own protection. You don't get to decide that now, she said softly. It doesn't work that way. 4. The ambush in aisle 5. 3 days later, Ethan found himself in the baby food aisle of a local supermarket at 7 in the morning, reading labels like his life depended on it. Organic sweet potato versus plain sweet potato. Stage 2 versus Stage 3. The sheer number of decisions required to feed one small human was overwhelming. His phone had been buzzing incessantly since he'd missed the Tokyo investor meeting, but he had learned to silence it during what he now considered Leo hours, the windows in the early morning and evening when Clara had agreed to let him visit. "You don't have to buy anything," she had told him the night before as he reluctantly prepared to leave. "Just come back tomorrow if you want, same time." It was the first crack in the wall she had built around herself, and Ethan wasn't going to waste it. He was comparing 2 jars of banana puree when a familiar voice froze him solid. "Ethan Ellis, they said you'd completely lost your mind, but I didn't believe it until now." Slowly, Ethan turned to face Marcus Holloway, his former business partner, his best man, and the person he had trusted most in the world until everything fell apart 18 months ago. Marcus looked exactly the same. Perfectly coiffed blonde hair, designer casual wear that cost more than most people's cars, and that practiced smile that could convince investors to sign checks for millions. But his blue eyes held a coldness that hadn't been there during their friendship. "Marcus," Ethan's voice was carefully neutral, though his heart hammered. "What are you doing in Seattle? Expansion meeting with the Peterson Group. What are you doing buying baby food at 7 in the morning?" Marcus's gaze dropped to the jars in Ethan's hands, and his smile became predatory. "Don't tell me you're playing daddy now." The casual cruelty in his tone tightened Ethan's jaw. "What I do with my personal time is no longer your concern." "Oh, but it is." Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice to the confidential tone they had once used to discuss multi-billion-dollar acquisitions. "Look, I've been keeping tabs on you, old friend. Missed board meetings, delegated responsibilities, canceled the Singapore excursion you were 6 months in the making. Your investors are getting nervous." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "How do you know about Singapore?" "I know a lot of things. Like that your photographer ex-wife is struggling to make ends meet in that suburban house. Like that you've been secretly playing house instead of running your company." Marcus's smile widened, like how easy it would be for someone to step in and acquire Vegatech while you're distracted by domestic bliss. The jars of baby food slipped from Ethan's hands, hitting the linoleum floor with a sound that seemed to echo through the empty store. "You son of a—" "Careful, Ethan. That's not very familial language." Marcus bent down to pick up one of the jars, examining the label with exaggerated interest. "Organic Stage 2 sweet potato puree. How? Domestic. Tell me, does little Leo like sweet potatoes? Or does he prefer plain, like his dada?" Ethan's blood ran cold. There was only one way Marcus knew Leo's name. Only one person who would have told him. "It's impossible," Ethan whispered. "Is it?" Marcus pulled out his phone, swiping to a photo that made Ethan's world tilt. It was Clara, laughing over coffee at what looked like a small cafe. Sitting opposite her was someone Ethan didn't recognize, a woman with short, reddish-brown hair and kind eyes. "Your ex-wife is quite trusting, you know. Makes friends easily. My associate Chloe Brooks has been a huge help in learning about your new priorities." Ethan's hands trembled as he gripped Marcus by the collar of his shirt. "If you've done anything at all." "I don't need to harm them, Ethan." Marcus's laugh was genuinely amused. "They're doing all the work for me. Did you know Clara has been struggling to afford daycare? That she's been taking wedding photography jobs she hates just to pay the rent? That she lies awake at night wondering if she made the right decision staying with Leo when his billionaire father clearly didn't want them?" Every word hit Ethan like a physical blow. "How could you possibly know that?" "Because Chloe has been listening. For weeks. Building trust. Offering sympathy. Becoming the friend poor, lonely Clara desperately needed." Marcus straightened his shirt where Ethan had grabbed him. Amazing what people share when they think they're talking to someone who cares. "What do you want?" Ethan's voice was deadly quiet. "What I've always wanted. Vegatech. Your investors, your patents, Your government contracts?" Marcus leaned in. "The difference is, now I know exactly how to get them. See, a man who is too distracted by his family to run his company properly, well, that's a liability. And liabilities are removed. I will never sell to you. You won't have a choice. Not when the board realizes you've been lying to them about your priorities. Not when they find out you've been using company resources to research your ex-wife's financials." Marcus's smile was pure venom. "Oh yes, I know that too. Vanessa has been quite communicative with my people." Ethan felt the floor drop out from under him. Vanessa, who had been with him for 3 years, who knew every detail of his personal and professional life, who had access to everything. "She's been working for you. Let's just say she values job security more than loyalty. Amazing how a small offer of career advancement can change someone's perspective." Marcus checked his watch. A platinum Rolex Ethan recognized because he had given Marcus the same model for his birthday years ago. "I have to go. Board meeting at 9. Oh wait, that's your board meeting, isn't it? The one you'll miss because you're here buying baby food for a child you abandoned." His laugh echoed through the empty aisle. "See you around, old friend." Ethan stood paralyzed among the scattered jars of baby food. His mind raced over the implications of what he had just learned. Marcus wasn't just after his company. He had been systematically dismantling Ethan's life for months, using the people closest to him as weapons. Vanessa, who knew his schedule better than he did. Chloe, whoever she was, who had been manipulating Clara into revealing information about his family. And somewhere in this web of betrayal, Leo and Clara were completely vulnerable, unaware that their lives had become pawns in a game Ethan was just beginning to understand. With shaking hands, Ethan pulled out his phone and dialed Clara's number. It went straight to voicemail, her cheerful voice telling him to leave a message and she'd get back to him soon. "Clara, it's me. Do not trust anyone new in your life. I know it sounds insane, but I'll explain everything when I see you. I'm on my way now, and we need to talk about—" The line cut off. His phone, which had been buzzing with messages all morning, was now completely silent. And for the first time since he'd heard Leo say "Dada" 3 days ago, Ethan realized that wanting his family back might not be enough to protect them from the enemies he had created by pushing them away. The execution scenario. Ethan's hands trembled as he sped through Seattle traffic, his Aston Martin weaving through cars like a predator hunting its prey. Every red light felt like an eternity, every delay a potential catastrophe. He'd tried calling Clara 6 more times, each call going straight to voicemail, each silence more terrifying than the last. When he finally reached Sycamore Lane, his heart nearly stopped. Clara's old Honda wasn't in the driveway, and the house looked unsettlingly quiet. He hammered on the door, then used the spare key she'd given him 2 days prior, a gesture of trust that now felt prophetic. "Clara! Leo!" His voice echoed through the empty rooms. The house was too quiet, too still. Leo's toys were scattered across the living room floor as always, but something was wrong. A half-full coffee cup sat on the kitchen counter, still lukewarm to the touch. Clara's purse was gone, but her camera bag remained by the door. She never went anywhere without that camera, unless something was urgent. Ethan's phone vibrated with a text message from an unknown number. "Beautiful family. Shame if anything happened to them. Board meeting, 1 hour. Come alone." The blood roared in his ears as he sprinted back to his car. The Vega Tech headquarters soared 43 stories above downtown Seattle, a gleaming monument to everything Ethan had built from nothing. He had designed every floor, approved every hire, fought for every contract that had made the company what it was. Now, as he rode the elevator up to the 42nd floor boardroom, he realized he might be walking into his own execution. The conference room was more crowded than he expected. The 12 board members sat around the polished mahogany table like judges in a tribunal, their faces ranging from disappointed to openly hostile. At the head of the table, in Ethan's usual chair, sat Marcus Holloway. "Ah, Ethan, so good of you to join us." Marcus's smile was razor sharp. "I was just explaining to the board your recent shift in priorities." Vanessa Chin sat to Marcus's right, her laptop open, refusing to meet Ethan's eye. The woman who had organized his life for 3 years, who had known Erdion every meeting, every decision, every vulnerable moment since his divorce. The betrayal cut deeper than he expected. "Where are they?" Ethan's voice was deadly quiet. "Where are who?" Marcus's expression was the picture of innocent confusion. "Please, sit down. We have much to discuss." Richard Vance, the lead investor and most senior board member, cleared his throat. "Ethan, we are concerned about your recent behavior. Missed meetings, delegated responsibilities, canceled international travel. This is not like you, not like." "And then there's this," added Jessica Thorne, sliding a tablet down the table. On the screen was a financial report showing Vegatech's projected earnings, alongside a detailed analysis of Ethan's recent decisions. Every choice he had made to spend time with Leo instead of in the office was highlighted in red. "You've cost this company $12 million in potential revenue just in the last month," said Daniel Chen. "The Singapore expansion has stalled. The Tokyo investors are threatening to pull out, and our competitors are circling like vultures." Ethan's eyes never left Marcus's face. Funny how quickly our competitors learned about internal company matters. "Are you suggesting corporate espionage?" Marcus's chuckle was perfectly modulated for the audience. "That's a serious accusation to make without proof." "I have proof." Ethan pulled out his phone, swiping to the photos he had managed to take of Marcus at the supermarket. "Do you care to explain why you were buying my ex-wife coffee last week, or why your associate Chloe has been documenting my family's daily routine?" The room erupted in murmurs, but Marcus remained calm. Too calm. "I think the stress of trying to balance a failing personal life with professional responsibilities has affected your judgment," Marcus said smoothly. "You're seeing conspiracies where there are only consequences." Vanessa finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "The cancellation of the Singapore trip alone cost us the Peterson contract. That was $300 million over 5 years. And why did I cancel Singapore?" Ethan turned to face her squarely. "Because you told me Leo was in the hospital with pneumonia. Except he wasn't, was he, Vanessa? That was a lie. You manipulated me into missing that meeting." Vanessa's face went white, but before she could respond, Marcus cut in. "Even if that were true, which sounds like the paranoid fantasy of a man under extreme stress, it only proves my point. You are easily manipulated when it comes to your family. That makes you a liability." Richard Vance leaned forward. "Ethan, you built this company from nothing, and we all respect that. But leadership requires sacrifice. You can't run a multi-billion-dollar corporation while playing weekend dad." "Weekend dad?" The words hit Ethan like a slap. "He is my son." "A son you abandoned," Jessica Thorne stated bluntly. "A son you've suddenly decided to care about just when your company needs you most. The timing is unfortunate." Ethan felt the walls closing in. Every decision he had made to prioritize Leo, every moment he had chosen to be a father instead of a CEO, was being used against him. And somewhere in this web of betrayal, Clara and Leo were missing. "I move for a vote of no confidence," Marcus announced suddenly. "Effective immediately, I propose Ethan Ellis be removed as CEO of Vegatech and an emergency leadership be appointed to prevent further damage to the company." "Seconded," Vanessa said quickly. Ethan's world tilted. He had known this was coming, but the reality hit him like a physical blow. 12 years of building this empire, sacrificing everything, including his marriage, for the company's success. And it could all be gone in a single vote. "You can't do this," he said, though he knew they could. "Actually, we can," Richard Vance responded, though he looked genuinely regretful. "Your recent behavior has put the entire company at risk. The board has a fiduciary responsibility to the shareholders. All in favor, Marcus called out. 8 hands went up around the table. 8 people who had profited from Ethan's vision, who had gotten rich from his innovations, who had celebrated every milestone of Vegatech's meteoric rise. The motion is carried, Marcus announced, and Ethan could hear the satisfaction beneath his professional tone. Effective immediately, Ethan Ellis is removed as Chief Executive Officer of Vegatech. I will assume the role of interim CEO while we search for permanent leadership. The room spun around Ethan. In less than 10 minutes, he had lost everything he had built. The company, the fortune, the power. All stripped away by the very people who had once called him a visionary. Your access cards will be deactivated within the hour, Vanessa said, without looking at him. Security will escort you out of the building. As if summoned, 2 security guards appeared at the boardroom door. Men Ethan had hired, who had nodded respectfully to him every morning for years, were now ready to march him out of his own company. But none of it mattered. Not the money, not the power, not the empire he had built and lost. Only one thing mattered now. Where is my family? Ethan's voice cut through the post-vote chatter like a knife. Marcus rose slowly, smoothing his tie with deliberate precision. I'm sure they're fine. Clara seemed quite excited about the playdate Chloe set up for Leo. Something about a trip to the Woodland Park Zoo parking lot, I believe. The casual cruelty. Using his son as leverage. Manipulating Clara's loneliness to isolate her and Leo. It sent Ethan into a protective rage. If you harm them, what are you going to do? Marcus's mask finally slipped, revealing the cold ambition beneath. You're nobody now, Ethan. Just another divorced dad with no job and no money. Well, not no money. I'm sure you'll get some of the severance package eventually. The security guards moved forward, but Ethan was already moving toward the door. He had more important things to do than fight a battle he had already lost. As he reached the elevator, he heard Marcus's voice drift from the boardroom. Now, let's discuss the immediate steps to stabilize Vegatech's market position. The elevator doors closed, cutting off the sound of his life's work being dissected and redistributed. Ethan leaned against the mirrored wall, looking at his reflection. A man in an expensive suit who no longer had any power to protect the people he loved. His phone vibrated with another text. Woodland Park Zoo, parking lot, come alone, or they're going on a very long drive. Ethan's hands clenched into fists. Marcus had taken his company, his fortune, his standing in the world. But he had made one critical mistake. He had threatened Leo and Clara, and a man who has already lost everything has nothing left to lose. Would you have walked out of the meeting to save your family or stayed to fight for your company? Share your thoughts below. 6. A second chance to choose. The meaningful conclusion. The Woodland Park Zoo parking lot stretched before Ethan like a battleground shrouded in the autumn mist. It was mostly empty at this hour, with only maintenance vehicles and a few early morning joggers disturbing the quiet. His Aston Martin felt out of place among the family vans and modest sedans, a reminder of the life he'd just lost and the world he no longer belonged to. Ethan saw them before his car came to a complete stop. Clara was sitting on a bench near the playground, Leo in his stroller beside her, while a woman with short, reddish-brown hair, Chloe, presumably, sat close enough to look friendly, but positioned to intercept any escape attempt. From this distance, they looked like 3 friends enjoying a morning at the park. Only Ethan could see the tension in Clara's shoulders, the way she kept glancing around as if looking for exit routes. He parked and walked slowly toward them, every step calculated to appear non-threatening as his mind ran through the scenarios. Chloe looked up as he approached, her smile bright and practiced, the kind of expression that had probably convinced Clara she'd found a genuine friend in this lonely new phase of her life. Ethan, what a coincidence! Chloe's voice held just the right note of surprise and warmth. Clara was just telling me all about you. Clara's eyes met his across the 10 feet of space between them, and he saw the confusion and mounting fear there. She had trusted this woman, confided in her, probably shared her hopes that he might actually change. Now she was starting to understand that every vulnerability she had exposed had been a weapon used against her. Hello, Chloe, Ethan said carefully. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. Oh, how rude of me. I'm Chloe Brooks. I work in consulting. Her laugh was light and convincing. Clara and I met at that little coffee shop on Pine Street. I've heard so much about you. Leo was happily babbling in his stroller, reaching for a colorful toy tethered to the bumper bar. He had no idea his innocent morning outing had become the center of a game that could destroy his family. The sight of his son's trusting smile squeezed his chest with protective fury. Chloe has been a huge help, Clara said quietly, and Ethan caught the subtle emphasis on the word help. A warning, perhaps, that she was beginning to piece things together. She offered to bring us to see the animals this morning, said it would be educational. Education is so important, Chloe nodded smoothly. Children learn so much from new experiences, don't you think, Mr. Ellis? Or should I say, ex-CEO Ellis? The mask slipped slightly, revealing the predator beneath the friendly facade. Clara's face went white as the realization set in. What is going on? Clara's voice was firm, but Ethan could see her hands tremble as she gripped Leo's stroller handle. Before Ethan could answer, a familiar figure emerged from behind a cluster of trees near the duck pond. Marcus Holloway strode toward them, with the confident gait of a man who held all the cards, his expensive casual clothing making him look more dangerous than any business suit. Family meeting, Marcus said pleasantly. How touching. Clara stood up abruptly, positioning herself between the stroller and Marcus. Ethan, who is this man? Marcus Holloway, Ethan replied, his eyes never leaving his former friend. My ex-business partner. The man who just stole my company. Steal is such an ugly word, Marcus said, with a theatrical sigh. I prefer acquired through superior strategic planning. But we're not here to discuss business, are we? We're here to discuss the future. Chloe had moved closer to the stroller, her friendly demeanor completely evaporated. She was younger than Ethan had first thought, probably in her mid-20s, with the kind of sharp intelligence that made her dangerous in both obvious and non-obvious ways. The future is quite simple, Marcus continued. You have something I want, and I have something you want. A trade, one might say. I have nothing you could possibly want, Ethan said. You took everything. Not quite. Marcus pulled out his phone, swiping to something that made his smile widen. You see, when I was acquiring your company, I discovered some very interesting information. Patents that aren't yet legally filed. Government contracts that could be problematic if certain details were made public. Research data your competitors would pay a fortune for. Ethan's blood ran cold. The military contracts. The self-driving vehicle technology that was still under classified development. The AI algorithms that gave Vegatech its competitive edge. It was all technically his intellectual property until the legal transfer was complete. You want me to sign over my patents. All of them. Every algorithm. Every prototype. Every piece of research you've developed over the past 12 years. Marcus motioned to Chloe, who produced a tablet and a stylus. One signature, and your lovely family can go back to their quiet suburban life. Clara had gone completely still, gripping Leo's stroller handle with white knuckles. What if he doesn't sign? Marcus's smile never wavered. Well, that would be unfortunate. You see, Chloe here has dug up some very troubling information about your living situation, Clara. Financial instability. A history of post-divorce depression. Questions about your ability to provide adequate care for little Leo. That's not true, Clara said fiercely. Truth is relative, Chloe said pleasantly. Child Protective Services tends to worry a lot about single mothers who can't afford proper child care. who leave babies with elderly neighbors for hours, who struggle to maintain stable housing. The threat hit Ethan like a physical blow. They weren't just threatening Clara and Leo's safety. They were threatening to tear his family apart through legal channels that could take months or years to resolve. "You bastards," Clara breathed, finally grasping the full scope of the trap they had fallen into. "Business is business," Marcus said with a shrug. "Though I have to admit, this one is more personal than most of my acquisitions. You see, Ethan, you cost me everything once. Remember Project Henderson? The deal you stole right out from under my nose?" Ethan remembered. 5 years ago, Marcus had been negotiating an exclusive contract with Henderson Industries for their warehouse automation system. Ethan had discovered Marcus planned to use substandard components to maximize profit margins, potentially putting workers at risk. He had gone to Henderson directly with a better offer and a safer design. "You were going to cut corners that could have killed people," Ethan said. "I was going to make us both very rich. But you had to play the hero, didn't you? You cost me 50 million euros because you couldn't tolerate a little acceptable risk." Marcus's mask was completely gone now, revealing years of festering resentment. "Well, now it's my turn to call the shots." Leo chose that moment to start whimpering, reaching his arms out to Ethan with the universal "pick me up" gesture. The sound of his son's distressed babbling cut through Ethan's fury like a knife. "Let me hold him," Ethan said, taking a step forward. "I don't think so," Chloe said sharply, her hand moving to rest on the stroller's bumper bar. "Babies can be so unpredictable, especially when they're upset." The implied threat made Clara gasp. "You wouldn't hurt a child?" "Of course not," Marcus said with false reassurance. "But accidents happen. Busy parking lots, distracted caregivers, a stroller rolling into traffic." He let the words hang in the air like venom. So many tragic possibilities. Ethan felt something break inside his chest. Not break, but crystallize into perfect cold clarity. These people had taken his company, manipulated his family, and now they were threatening his son. But in trying to destroy everything he cared about, they had made one fundamental mistake. They had assumed he was still thinking like a businessman. "Give me the tablet," Ethan said quietly. "Ethan, no!" Clara protested. "It's okay," he said, meeting her eyes. For the first time in months, he felt completely sure of what he was doing. "It's just a company." Marcus's triumph was reflected on his face as he signaled Chloe to hand over the device. "Wise choice. I knew you'd come around eventually." Ethan took the tablet, scanning the legal documents that would transfer ownership of every patent, every innovation, every breakthrough he had achieved over a decade. Hundreds of millions of dollars of intellectual property, boiled down to a few electronic signatures. He looked at Leo, who had quieted down, and was watching him with those serious gray eyes that looked so much like his own. Then he looked at Clara, who was watching him with a mixture of gratitude and heartbreak. "Are you sure this is all you want?" Ethan asked, the stylus poised over the signature line. "Every last patent," Marcus confirmed. "Don't try to be clever, Ethan. I had lawyers verify every document. And if I sign this, you leave my family alone? Permanently? You have my word." Ethan almost laughed at the absurdity of trusting Marcus's word about anything. But it didn't matter, because he had already made his decision. He signed the documents with swift, decisive strokes, transferring 12 years of his life's work in under 30 seconds. "There you go," he said, handing the tablet back to Chloe. "It's done." Marcus snatched the device, his eyes gleaming as he verified the signatures. "A pleasure doing business with you, old friend." But as he spoke, Ethan was already reaching for his phone, dialing a number he had memorized years ago, but hoped never to have to use. "What are you doing?" Chloe asked sharply. "Calling the FBI field office," Ethan said calmly as the phone began to ring. "You see those military contracts you were so interested in? They're classified, which means you just committed espionage against the federal government. Marcus's face went white. You can't prove— Agent Torres, this is Ethan Ellis. I need to report a breach of classified technology and corporate espionage. Yes, I can hold. The color drained from Chloe's face as she realized they had been outmaneuvered. He's lying. Am I? Ethan smiled grimly as the federal agent's voices crackled through his phone speaker. It turns out, losing everything makes you very creative about what you're willing to sacrifice. In the distance, Ethan could hear sirens approaching rapidly. 7. The homecoming. Final act. The federal agents arrived in unmarked vehicles, clearing the park with sirens, and took the scene swiftly into custody. Special Agent Rebecca Torres, a woman in her 40s with steely gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, took Ethan's statement while Marcus and Chloe were handcuffed. The classified military contracts had triggered federal interest, corporate espionage charges that could result in decades in federal prison. We'll need you to come in for a full debriefing tomorrow, Agent Torres told Ethan, as they watched the last of the federal vehicles disappear down the winding park road. The patent transfers will need to be reversed, which means lengthy legal proceedings. What about Vegatech? That's a civil matter. But if we can prove the board vote was influenced by stolen, classified information— She let the implication hang in the air. Let's just say your company's future is far from decided. Now, 3 hours later, Ethan was sitting on Clara's living room floor, watching Leo stack blocks with the focused determination of someone building a fortress. The baby had no idea his morning at the park had been anything more than an adventure, and Ethan intended to keep it that way. Clara came out of the kitchen with 2 mugs of coffee, her hands only slightly steadier than they had been in the park. She had changed into soft jeans and a large sweater that made her look younger, more like the woman he had fallen in love with. Is it really over? She asked, sitting on the couch above where he sat on the floor. The immediate threat, yes. Marcus and Chloe will be in federal custody for a long time. Ethan caught one of Leo's blocks as it tumbled toward him, examining the bright red cube as if it held secrets. But everything else? I don't know. The company, the patents, whether I'll have anything left when the legal dust settles. And if you don't have anything left? The question hung between them like a bridge she wasn't sure either of them was ready to cross. Ethan looked up at Clara, studying the face he had memorized over 2 years of marriage and 11 months of regret. Then I start over. Find a new job. Probably move to a smaller place. He paused, bracing himself for the hardest truths. Maybe I learn how to be the kind of man who deserves a second chance. Leo babbled happily and crawled over to Ethan, pulling himself up by gripping his father's shirt. At 11 months, he was all curiosity and determination, utterly fearless in the way only children can be. He lost his balance and tumbled onto his back, but instead of crying, he laughed. He missed you, Clara said softly. During those 11 months, sometimes he'd see men on the street and point, as if he was looking for you. The words hit Ethan harder than any boardroom confrontation. I am sorry. For everything. For the phone call. For staying away. For putting you both in danger because I was too stubborn to see what Marcus was planning. Clara remained silent for a long moment, watching Leo attempt to climb into Ethan's lap. I was angry for a long time. Hurt. I kept thinking that if you truly loved us, you would have fought harder to stay. I was afraid, Ethan admitted. Not of you or Leo, but of this. Of failing as a husband and father the same way I had failed at everything else that mattered. What do you want now, Ethan? Clara asked. Truly, Ethan looked at his son, at the woman who had once been his wife, and was still the other half of his soul, at the life he had walked away from, and the one he had somehow been given a chance to choose again. I want to learn how to bathe him without getting both of us nervous, he said. I want to know his favorite toy, and if he's teething, and if he still wakes up at 3 in the morning, like he did when he was a newborn. He paused, gathering his courage for the hardest truths. I want to apologize to you every day for the rest of my life and find some way to earn back what I threw away. I want to be the man you thought you married, the father Leo deserves. Clara leaned forward. Not marriage. Not yet. But maybe. Maybe we could start with dinner. Family dinners, where you help with Leo's bedtime routine, and we figure out how to be in the same room without it feeling like a negotiation. I would like that. And doctor's appointments. For the new baby. You missed everything with Leo, but if you want to be involved this time, I want to be there for everything, Ethan said fiercely. Every appointment, every milestone, every 3 a.m. feeding. For the first time since he'd arrived on her doorstep 3 days ago, Clara smiled. Truly smiled. The kind of expression that had made him fall in love with her in the first place. Then we'll start there, she said, and we'll see what happens. It wasn't a guarantee, it wasn't even a promise, but it was a start. And for the first time in months, Ethan thought that might be enough. Would you have made the same choice as Ethan? Giving up an empire for love? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your engagement means the world to the channel. Subscribe, and let us know your opinion.